Lisa, beleaguered Ports of Auckland has suffered another setback. The automation part of its business has been halted, while an investigation looks into how a robot was able to jump a concrete barrier, hitting a shipping container at the weekend. WorkSafe has been advised and is looking into the incident. The council-owned company is already under fire for major delays in clearing a huge backlog of cargo. Well, joining me now is Ports of Auckland spokesman Matt Ball. Matt, so what went wrong? What enabled this massive straddle carrier to lose control?
Oh, g'day, Lisa. So what happened is that it has a number of systems that control what it's meant to do. The system became overloaded. Instead of turning left, it went straight ahead. It went over a low retaining wall, so it's not a barrier that's meant to stop the straddle from doing anything. It's a retaining wall, and then it hit a container and came to a stop. The systems kicked in and stopped it then.
How big are these? How much do they weigh?
About 70 tonnes.
Sounds dangerous, having it barrelling out of control, going over a retaining wall. Was it dangerous?
No, well, not dangerous. It was dangerous to itself, I suppose, but it's not dangerous to any people. The way we have the system set up, we operate two multiple layers of safety, but if you can picture, like there's one big external layer of safety, like the castle walls, and that is meant to keep these machines in there. That has been very robustly tested through multiple system checks, and that is it's a geo-fence. And what that will do is stop any of these machines from leaving their enclosure.
How do you know that, Matt? Because you had a machine that was programmed to do a certain thing. Just bear with me for a second. It was a robot that was programmed to do a certain manoeuvre. It didn't do that manoeuvre. It went AWOL. And it went over a retainer fence. So clearly it's not following instructions. So how do you know the geofence even will work?
So that has been tested to a much higher degree, and it requires a much higher degree of assurance to enable these machines to run inside that test area. So
was the straddle carrier not tested to the same degree?
No. All the testing is done. It was doing what it was meant to do most of the time within this defined area with which it can't leave. So when it approaches when any of the straddles approach the edge of the geofence, what happens is it slows down and they stop. If anything fails, it fails safe. And
are both operated off the same software, Matt?
They're different systems.
Same software from the same company?
It's from the same company. The whole system is a package from the same company. I can't tell you exactly if one is a sub-company that produced the geofence or...
Again, it brings us back to the question of how you can guarantee, seeing as you've had a failure in one software system, that this other is safe. Can you tell us 100% your staff are safe when it comes to this equipment and the software you're using?
Yes, we would not allow it to run if we had any inkling that people outside of the enclosure would not be safe. It has been really, really rigorously tested. Again,
not that well if you've got one that's failed.
Well, you're talking about two different systems, Lisa.
The geofence, yes, and I'm talking about the straddle carrier now. You've had one that's failed, so clearly something is wrong. How many of these have you shut down at the moment?
So just to talk to your point, the system at the moment is still in the process of test and optimisation and improvement. So what's happened over the weekend is actually something that's sort of within the parameters of what we might expect. I mean, ideally, we don't want to actually come into contact with anything, but we know that we are going to get little bugs and flaws in the software, and that's part of the process that's underway at the moment. And so, this is the proving, when we've got half of the terminal automated and the rest of it operating in a manual fashion.
So how many straddle carriers are out of action right now of these automated?
All the automated ones, 27.
27?
We've stopped all of them.
What does that mean for delays at the port?
Funnily enough, it hasn't actually had a major impact. It has slowed down the truck side of the operation a little bit, but we've been able to rejig our labour, and we've actually sped up the ship side of the operation.
What do you mean by rejig your labour?
Just allocate people to different cranes, concentrate people on one ship as opposed to splitting them across the automated yard and the manual yard.
So you're kind of increasing productivity, are you?
On the crane side, yes.
So why haven't you done that before to deal with the delays that you've been facing?
Well, Lisa, we're still trying to work through the automated system. We have to get it running. It's been delayed because of COVID. The COVID lockdown meant that we couldn't implement it in the quiet season, which is when we wanted to do that. But we still have to get through this. Ultimately, Ports of Auckland is restricted in the amount of space that it has. We can't reclaim any more land. We're in the central city. So we have to have a system like automation if we are to cope with ongoing freight growth.
But you've just told me you're more productive. You just told me you're more productive without automation.
No, you're misinterpreting there. So all I've said is we reallocated some crews and we've been able to push some ships through a bit more quickly. That's a short-term thing.
How many problems have you had with the automated system? Because this is not the first one, is it?
I can't tell you how many. I mean, we have worked through a number of bugs through the system. That is not unexpected. In comparison to automated systems overseas of a similar nature, straddle terminal.
But you must be monitoring this quite closely. So give me a ballpark. How many glitches have you had?
I don't have those numbers off the top of my head, but I do know that we are at a similar level of proficiency when compared to similar automation systems overseas in Australia, for example.
So if nobody was at risk during this, why is WorkSafe looking into the incident?
Because we've notified them of it. It's a standard practice.
Because it's a serious incident?
Because a straddle hit a container. So we'd absolutely notify whether it was a person driving or whether it's a robot.
There's a benchmark for reporting here. So what I'm saying to you is, have you crossed the benchmark for this to be a serious incident that you need to report to WorkSafe?
I would have to check on that one. I mean, we have notified it. I'm not sure if that was a compulsory notification or if it was just we've done it out of practice because it's our practice.
How long do you think this is going to take to fix?
We've actually uploaded the software. We're in the process of testing now. The testing is quite rigorous for this, as you can imagine. So we do a static test. We test with one straddle. We test with 3 straddles. We're testing with 6 straddles at the moment. We're not going to run it overnight. That's a deliberate decision not to do it overnight. We will reassess it in the morning, see where we've got to, and then make a decision from there on when we reactivate it.
So will you test every one of those automated straddle carriers that you've stood down?
Not all of them are working at the moment because we're only operating half the terminal, but we will test all of the straddles that are going to work in that system, in that automated area.
Are they not working because something's wrong with them?
No. Remember, we've automated only half of the terminal, so we don't need all the straddles at the moment.
Okay, so last time we talked to you, there were problems with ships waiting, up to 12 to 14 days to come in and unload. What's the current wait time?
The average is 8 days.
The average, and what's the outlier? What's the worst case scenario at the moment?
I couldn't give you an outlier. When I looked the other day, there was one ship waiting, so it wasn't a massive queue. It's sort of, if you take an average of 8, it's about 6 to 10.
Okay, and the other thing was you had 50 vacancies and you said that you were doing your best to fill them. So how many jobs have you still got vacant?
Well, I have to admit, I think I said on the program that we'd interviewed 30 people for the first tranche and we'd only got about 3 come through, but we've had a bit more success since then. We've managed to recruit a very skilled crane operator who just happened to be in the country, who's worked on our cranes at a port overseas. We've had a number of straddle drivers come back to work for us who previously worked at Ports of Auckland, and we've got some good people in the pipeline. So some of them, if they're new, we'll have to train them, and we've got some people in training at the moment. But we're hoping we should be able to have a full crane crew in place by Christmas and up and running and productive.
Appreciate you joining us. That is Ports of Auckland spokesman Matt Ball. As you heard there, They've stopped using their automated straddle carriers, which are these massive bits of equipment that help them move shipping containers after a fault has appeared, and saw one careering off the edge of a barrier over the weekend.